Alright guys, welcome back to my channel where we speak all about self-sufficiency when it comes to physical, spiritual, and financial health. Today, I wanted to speak about emotions. Should you always listen to your emotions? When should you listen to your emotions? What are really emotions? I love this topic because it's, for me, one of the things that can really hold you back or really push you forward. I love life, and when it comes to how I go about it as a student. And I feel like many times for you, for me, we think about these things in terms of like, how can I master it? How can it be something that pushes me forward? And so what I've come to learn about all things is that nothing is ever truly good or bad. The pendulum does swing, where it'll move into a direction where it's favorable, and then it'll move into another direction where it's unpleasant. You're still gaining something both times. You're still gaining information that you could use to reach your goals. And so just to give you guys a little bit of background of my experience with emotions. So in my youth, I was very sensitive, and any time that I felt emotions coming up around people, I would immediately start to tear up and I would immediately start to cry. I always felt myself feeling very empathetic. I felt like I could always feel other people's emotions, and it was easy for me to feel sadness. But as I face adversity and as I face challenges in my social life, I felt like they were holding me back. I felt like my emotions were getting in the way from me doing. And I'm sure we can all understand, I feel like we live in a society where people think that productivity is doing. I feel like only recently we've seen the benefits of being and feeling. I think especially a lot of men realize that like if they want to be in really great relationships, they have to do a lot of being and a lot of feeling. Also, when it comes to starting your own business, especially for men, we want to make more money, we want to be better providers. You have to feel into your emotions because you have to follow your intuition. And not only that, when you're selling a product and when you're, speaking to a partner or when you're trying to get funding, they have to feel you. And so if you neglect your emotions, they can't really feel those things. Of course, doing is important, but feeling also plays a really, really big role. And so I realized that I had this ability to kind of like ignore my emotions, which we all kind of develop. But it wasn't until I started doing things that were unhealthy and I started to see what the neglect of my emotions started to do and how it would all surface to the top. I started finding myself in situations where I felt numb, where I felt completely lost, and I felt disconnected from what was going on. I felt paralyzed, truthfully. And it wasn't until I worked with a mentor and a coach where I was really able to, first of all, admit to myself that emotions were important, and then start to dedicate time to really sit with my emotions, go over them, analyze them, process them, expand on them. And once I started to do that, I started to feel certain abilities awaken. Like, I always had intuition in my life, but the intuition kind of felt like a compass, and a compass can be very two-dimensional. Whereas now with my emotions, it feels like my emotions is more of a three-dimensional GPS, where I know in what direction to go into, but I also know the intensity at which I should enter in that direction. Sometimes I also know when to pull back as well, and at what intensity versus just forward or backwards, left or right. And again, this takes practice, but what I want to say here is that leaning into your emotions and doing emotional work can really be a tool. And if you neglect your emotions, it can really be a liability. So when you're speaking here about very clearly what can turn into an asset or what can very easily become a liability. What will that look like for you? It's completely different. I've made videos in the past where I speak about developing your intuition and working with what you have is first about being present. So figure out where you're at in your level of emotions. Something that I like to do is put it out on a scale of 1 through 10. How well do you feel on a scale of 1 through 10? And track it on a daily basis. Sometimes you'll be feeling a 5, sometimes you'll be feeling an 8. but it's just the practice of paying attention to it and tracking and speaking about it that will help you get better and better and better. You'll have a place to start. Your body will start to feel that you're paying attention to it, and you'll start to, progress on this journey of turning your emotional body into an asset. What I've come to also realize is that, like you heard in my own story, we can sometimes push our emotions down with shame, judgment, whether it comes from external or internal, sometimes a little bit of both. Best thing to do is to start to create a safe space for yourself and try to expand it. Start with your mind, create it as a safe place. It's not always easy, but try to expand it. Try to really expand it. Sometimes, you don't have anyone around you where you can really, cultivate a safe space that's bigger than just your body or, a certain location. For me, many times it was the bathroom. The bathroom was my safe space. But, you can't be in there for that long. So, how do you grow with what you have? Take it one step at a time. Also understand that your challenge and your adventure is unique to yourself. And that really is truly a gift. It doesn't always feel like that, but it truly is a gift. I've realized that once I leaned into my emotions, I was able to develop an even stronger sense of perspective shift and a stronger sense of gratitude, because I wasn't just saying these things and talking about them. I really was able to feel them. And when good things came my way, I was able to feel them more. And whenever bad things came my way, I was able to feel the positive feelings that I wanted more and almost like bring them to my present reality. And again, this takes practice. This takes a lot of work. But, the question is like, should you listen to your emotions all the time? This is now kind of like a conversation of like balance, because what I've come to realize, and at least my current thought is that your emotions, typically the ones that are hard to understand, come from the past, and they come with an engraving that came with a younger version of yourself. So a lot of your emotions are almost like teenager-like, maybe toddler-like. And so should you always listen to those emotions? One could argue yes. I argue always for balance. Again, there's no such thing as good or bad. But too much of anything will kill you. Water is good for you, air is good for you, but too much air, too much oxygen, too much water is bad for you. So what I like to do is treat my emotions like they're my child. There is, always a time and a place for everything. Sometimes if you're at the grocery store, it's not always the best time to be completely comfortable and transparent with your emotions. Sometimes you want to bring that back home, bring that into a safe space, because you also want to be sensitive to other people. I've realized this through my different ceremonies with plant medicines. Is like, you may have this super intense emotion where you're like, oh, I gotta let it out, I gotta release this right now. But at the same point in time, there's always a time and a place for everything. Like, the bathroom is where you do certain things, right? So like, if you have certain emotions, if you have certain things that you want to let out, you don't want to, burden other people. Is there this objective perspective of everything will be fine if you do? Yes, everything will be fine. I've had experiences where I threw up at a restaurant. I was like super, super drunk and I threw up at a restaurant. And I used to shame myself a lot about that, because how could you not? Like, I felt like super embarrassed about it. But then I realized, like, not only do you have to choose what you care about, but like the universe has this amazing ability to turn whatever happens and make it okay. I've had certain experiences where, I quite literally multiple times in my life, I felt like I was actually going to die. And this one time I was with a friend and we were in bed just hanging out, and I peed on myself because I thought I was going to die. Again, that's something that I could shame myself about, but I realized that everything turned out fine, and it was also a lesson. I'm sure we've all, done things that we've been a little embarrassed about, but it all turns out okay. But there does come a point in time where you can mature and graduate from that experience. I now know that even though I know things are going to turn out okay, I can still graduate. I can still go to this next level and, step out of the room. I can take a deep breath and journal later. I don't have to explode on people. Of course, there is this balance again of being the student and the teacher. And sometimes I have to, ask people to kind of just handle it and take my authentic self. But there are times where I can carry my own, bucket. There's this concept in plant ceremonies where, you have this purge bucket where if you feel like you're going to throw up, you have this purge bucket. You throw up in the bucket. Could I throw up on the ground? Sure. But I have my bucket. And not only that, there's this other level to it where I feel like I'm going to throw up. I can step away from the room. And it's just this like extra level of abundance and service that I think leaders should really lean into. So I use all those examples to let you know that emotions are a beautiful thing for sure. They can become an asset. They can become a liability. Everyone's on different levels in terms of how they work with their emotions. But just to let you know that it's a yes and a no answer. And it changes throughout your levels of maturity with emotion. And it's a responsible thing to do because you can show up for others in being more responsible with your emotions. But you also, the more work you do by being extra responsible with your emotions, you have more to rely on as you face bigger and more unexpected challenges, because there's always something in our blind spot. You can be more prepared for future, more complex emotions if you try to be super responsible with your emotions. And again, this is balance. I'm not saying keep it all to yourself and don't talk to anyone about it because you're trying to be responsible. What I'm saying is that there's a balance. Have someone that you can vent to, but also be someone that someone else can vent to, but also be able to take those emotions that you feel from when someone vents to you and be able to release them in a healthy way. Just be conscious of the energy and know that there's not always one fixed answer for every scenario. It's a little bit of everything, and it always comes back to yourself, knowing yourself, that self-awareness work. Don't shame yourself. Don't judge yourself about your emotions. Work with your emotions. Let them speak to you. Speak back to them. And it is a relationship that you have to manage and maintain. So, hope you guys enjoyed that. That's my little rant on emotions. Again, it can be very complicated to manage these things, but I think, again, speaking about these things can be very, very helpful. And I do a lot of work on myself, so I know that this can be helpful for a lot of you out there. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. If you're new to the community or you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please comment them down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.